Welcome to the Extra Salt Podcast, Episode 2. This is being recorded the day after Extra Salt just beat Dignitas. So at this point, Extra Salt has played 3 matches over in Europe. They're 2-1, losing to Team Spirit and then beating Big and then Dignitas. So let's talk about Spirit. Versus Spirit, Extra Salt seemed very hesitant, especially on Train. They did a lot more like defaulting and working Ivy, which is pretty unexpected and isn't typically what they've kind of done historically. Spirit also kept a player in Hell, which would peek Sandwich, and that actually worked really well for Spirit, kind of disrupting what Extra Salt was doing. But everything just felt like a little off. They were holding some angles too wide. They weren't smoking a molly, which ends up killing 3 of them on a round where they probably would have won. They were flashing themselves, stuff like that. Round 4, they were versus Pistols, and OC decides to try and fight them. He's pushing Ivy and sees all of them and decides to go and try and fight them when the round is over. And he ends up dying, and they end up losing 3 players because he dies, then they go, and then JT dies of the bomb. So they end up losing 3 players there, and it really hurts the economy. So just a decision like that where he should have just seen them and left because there was no chance that they were going to defuse, and he doesn't really get anything by killing people with just USPs. He gets a couple $100, but if he dies, he loses way more than that. And they just kind of got stalled out on the T side, which I didn't really expect. And then on the CT side, I thought they could have gotten more creative. They mostly just kind of held the sites. And it could just be first game jitters, which I think is most likely. But it was just very abnormal since they're typically so well drilled. Or it could have been that they had some sort of read on Spirit and they were going to play against the way Spirit played, and it ended up not working out. But like I said, I think it was mostly just being their first game over in Europe and all that comes along with that. I thought Marky and Fang played really well on Train. They both fragged very well. And then on Dust, it was kind of a similar story. SDY is apparently insane at pistol rounds, getting a 4K in both of the pistol rounds. But OC struggled to get going, lost a ton of op battles. And then Marky, I think, is playing bad spots in Dust 2. So Marky is soloing B most of the time, and he's playing these one and done spots. So for example, on round 4, he jumps up on that little ledge that's in the middle of B site and goes to spray. He has nowhere to retreat to because he's up on the ledge. There's no hiding. Dies, and they lose the round because the whole site is now taken because he's there by himself. And then in round 6, he's playing up front near the doorway, but like on the right side in the little right cubby. And he gets killed before he even takes a shot. And again, round is over immediately because they have the full site and there's no way they're going to be able to retake that. So if he's playing either of these places, even if he gets 2 kills and dies, they still lose the round because then it's a 4v3, but then they have the whole site and Extra Salt has to completely come in and retake while those 3 people have all their utility. He needs to play places like default on site where he can shoot and then hide and then throw a flash to delay them, peek the other side, hide, throw down a smoke if he needs to. This kind of stuff to delay so Extra Salt can rotate in. And I did a whole video on this on how Floppy does this on Dust, and I think Marky needs to follow this as well, where the most important thing to do when you're soloing a site like that is not to die. Because the more you stall them, the more time you have for rotations to come in. So if they're execing on B and you're playing default or wherever and you're able to peek out, see them, maybe get a kill, fall back, hide where they can't shoot you, throw a flash, now your opper or whoever's coming from mid, now someone can push long and they can start wrapping in through the back. All that kind of stuff that if you're playing these spots where you die immediately, then it's just over. So I do think he does need to be changing up the rounds that the places that he's playing because it is costing them rounds. But that was definitely something that I noticed with Marky on B. But then there was also some stuff like Sonic throws a flash mid for JT and it ends up missing. So JT peeks and ends up immediately dying, where if the flash hits, JT peeks and probably gets a double kill. And then round 8 and 9, Fang picks up the op. And I think they potentially win both of these rounds if he ends up not doing that. Because in round 8, he could have spammed the smoke to get a kill instead just kind of sat there with the op. And then he's more agile on the retake. And then round 9, this could have been him or it could have been a teamwork thing, but he was holding an angle from up on site. And then JT was in elevator. and he ends up dying, and then JT isn't able to trade because they're holding different angles. So if he's holding a gun, I think he could have been, again, more agile or playing more with JT on a trade, but it also could have just been a communication error. Maybe JT should have been more pushed up, and then the second Fang dies while opping, JT can just, peek right out and get the kill. So it could have been either or, but I think that picking up the op there both times ended up being a mistake. And they do end up getting some great frags and finish out the CT side 7-8. But then on the T side, they again had some mistakes like not checking pit, which ends up costing them a round. They then miss a smoke as they're coming down long, which ends up costing them 2 lives. And so I think they could have done a better job overall as well, fighting long on Dust 2, so that way the other team would have to react to it, that kind of stuff. But the biggest problem, I think, was just nerves. I think they just had a ton of mistakes that Extra Salt or JT's teams don't normally make. So they kind of got that out of the way. I was expecting a better performance, but you could kind of see what was happening. There was just all these small micro things like missed smokes, flashes, like I said, that just kind of killed them. But then versus Big, they definitely came in ready. Their train was much faster pace. They were hitting A like they always do, fast out sandwich, fast out onto the trains, and then execing onto the site. They also had flawless B executes like in round 5 where they had a 4 stack there, exec in, no problem. And it was just much more their style and like kind of what you come to expect from a JT run train T side. One thing I thought that was interesting on train was when they played Spirit had this pop dog drop on T side where they stack on each other's head and then they drop down. But the bottom player was actually looking away and then to the ground, like looking at the wall and then to the ground. So that way, as they drop, the CT starts spraying at the person on the bottom, but then it takes, 4 or 5 bullets to kill them because they're hiding their head and turned around. So the player on top actually has a huge advantage. And I noticed this versus Spirit when they did it to Extra Salt. And then Extra Salt actually did this to Big. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if Extra Salt actually got this from Spirit or if this is a more common thing, but it wasn't something I had noticed before until the Spirit game. And they ended up using that. So I thought that was kind of a cool, interesting thing. So Train is Big's permaban. And so it was kind of interesting to see them let that through. I bet Extra Salt was very surprised to let that through, but very happy because they love Train. JT loves Train. And my thought on that is that Big probably has been scrimming and practicing this map trying to get better. And if you look at this tournament overall, it's like a Fun Spark tournament, so it doesn't really have RMR or anything like that. There isn't like a Pro League spot on the line or something like that. It's just this one playoff tournament. And it's also a double elimination. So if you're Big, you're thinking, we've been scrimming Train, we've been practicing it, when's a good time to pull it out? This might be a good time to pull it out. You're favored against Extra Salt. You saw them play against Spirit yesterday and lose on Train. You're probably thinking, well, this is a good time to give it a shot. And so I think that's why they did it. Now, they didn't really do a whole lot on CT side. They kind of just let Extra Salt exec all over them. In round 11, they actually did something interesting where they threw that Halls Molly, which, changed things up. They end up winning the round. Next round, they do a delayed upper peak, also wins in the round. So when they did unexpected stuff, they actually did very well, but it was far too late at that point. And they should know that the book on beating Extra Salt is to always interrupt their executes. This was something that we would see when they were on Cloud 9, like the famous Renegades game with Dexter, just constantly lurking and interrupting them, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the book. If you wanted a very quick overview of, hey, how do we beat this team? That's what I would say is you need to interrupt and get in their face and just make sure that they can't exec on you because they're so flawless and good at executing onto sites when they get there. And I think Extra Salt did a great job of mixing it up with aggression on CT and then backing off and making them continue to work. They didn't aggress, get a kill, and then continue. They would aggress, get a kill or two, and then fall back and then force them to continue clearing angles to use their now limited utility to get places, that kind of stuff. So I thought it was a very, very good train map versus Big. And Fang also just seems so good in clutch situations. I've been very, very impressed with Fang over the last 3 games. And then they played Dust 2, and they had a much better showing than versus Spirit, especially OC did. On round 4, they had a really nice retake where they completely locked Big onto the site. So after they planted, Big couldn't really go anywhere. Came in, had a really good retake. Round 5, though, Marky ends up getting kind of caught in a bad spot again. He's long, and there's 15 or 20 seconds left in the round. All he has to do is delay 5 seconds. He ends up getting caught with a nade out, standing out in the open, and that costs his life. And then that forces OC, who's playing for long to be safe, to have to adjust. He ends up getting opt while he's adjusting, so they kind of lose the round on that. I'm not trying to pick on Marky, but I do think that on Dust 2 specifically, he needs to be in better spots so he can delay rather than be trying to multi-frag. On Big CT side, though, Xantares just went absolutely off. And so while Dust 2 seems kind of weak right now, I think with some small adjustments, it could actually get pretty good. It's a map that I thought they always could be good at because I think they have two fantastic oppers who are very different and can just totally mix it up. I think Sonic and OC, I think their way they complement each other with their different opping styles can be great, and Dust 2 kind of lets you do that. So I do think that it could be a strong map if they adjust a little bit. One thought I had was, it's interesting that on Dust 2, Marky solos B, but then on Train, Fang solos B. So I was kind of wondering if it would be smart to have one player soloing both sites, because the mentality of soloing a site is much different than the mentality of holding a site with other people. So I'm wondering if you put Fang on B on Dust, is since he's already used to playing Train and understanding how you delay on Train to make sure that you give time for the people to rotate over to the site. I wonder if they could do the same thing by putting him on B on Dust, so that way he already has that mentality. Or I wonder if they put Marky as the solo on Train so he can kind of gain that mentality. Because from the couple games that I saw, it kind of felt like Marky was ready to frag out versus needing to be patient. Kind of like how in the last podcast I talked about JT playing ramp on Nuke, and how that spot is not really at all about getting kills. That spot is about delaying them and making sure that they have a struggle getting into the B site. Because if you die playing ramp, then just like on Dust, the round's over. They're on B site and it's fully theirs. But if you delay, get a kill or not, use your utility, use your molly to stop them coming out, use a flash, drop down. Now you're on the B site. They have to come in checking all these angles. They can't just run. And it totally changes the whole round. So on Dust and Train, it's kind of the same thing. So I wonder if it would be smarter to put one player who's soloing both, so that way they have that mentality built in and can just kind of be playing a more patient style rather than a I want to frag kind of style. It's just a thought. It might not matter. That might not even be a helpful thing, but it's just kind of a thought I had, because right now it's definitely costing rounds on their Dust 2. On Nuke, their teamwork has gotten so good. And now this could be that it's been a punish pick against them for the entire time they were on Cloud9, but their teamwork now looks really great. Their secondary flashes when they're going in A are awesome. Like you can see they flash, they get a couple players in, the CTs start to look, and then boom, another flash comes and they're completely blind again. And it's just super smart, and they have really good movement all across the map. And I thought they did well on the T side to stop Big anytime they would try and get aggressive. And then when they went to the CT side, they did a really good job of shrinking the map versus Big. So when JT got pushed off ramp, for example, one round, gets pushed off, he goes down, he waits, OC then peeks and doesn't see anybody. So then JT re-aggresses and takes all that map control back and ends up getting a flank and 2 kills. And then you'd see outside, Fang would push when they would have pressure elsewhere. So Fang would see how much outside control he can get. And so they did a really good job just shrinking the map. There's also a round where Sonic is sitting in a smoke at Squeaky, and then the smoke fades and he pushes out and takes that control. So as Big wraps around from outside to come in, he's already in an unexpected area outside Squeaky. So they just did a very good job of methodically pushing and thinking about how they're shrinking the map based on the way the rest of the round is going. And it isn't just like a mindless push like, hey, let's just run out and go here. It's they're hearing and seeing what's going on and then purposely making decisions to continue to shrink that map so that way they have less places to go. And so I thought that was very, very good. And they were able to survive a top player in the world in Zentaris playing a really great game. And that's very important because sometimes a great player can completely carry a match. But if a great player is carrying a match for a team and you're still able to win, that's a really good win in my book. And then versus Dignitas, it felt like Extra Salt just straight up was better. Now, like, I get that that's like super lazy analysis. But on Vertigo, they had some good CT re-aggression down ramp and stuff. And they even have, the famous play where Sonic flashes in Marky for the 3K on B. But they also just won way more gun battles. And they didn't show Dignitas any respect. And they just took it to them and they won. And then their train versus Dignitas, like, it was a masterclass by JT. I loved their T-side train. If you haven't watched it, you should go watch it. Because you can see starting in the third round that Dignitas has a plan to stop Extra Salt's A executes. In the third round, Dignitas is only on pistols, but you can see the second Extra Salt throws their smokes. I believe it was Forrest, wraps around Sandwich, trying to get behind him and like disrupt the A. Then the next round, they throw the same A smokes and they have spams lined up directly knowing where the line Extra Salt is taking. And then they had a follow-up grenade, a follow-up Molotov, and another follow-up grenade, all where they know that Extra Salt is execing too. So they had obviously studied this. They knew exactly what Extra Salt was doing when they were execing on A. And JT and Tion, I'm assuming because he's been in the comms, just had a fantastic counter to this. Because once they realized, I think it was the third time that they had someone die Sandwich after like behind the smokes, they started completely changing things up. They went B a couple times, then they brought heavy Ivy presence, and then there was one round late where they throw the A smokes and then they come out, but instead of going Sandwich like they always do, they bring almost everybody to E-box, and then they're fighting from E-box, and then once they've gotten that control, they then go back Sandwich once all of the CT's utility has been gone, and they take that area and get kills and just push the rest of the map that way. And so it was just so impressive. I just loved every minute of it. I thought it was so smart. And like I said, if you haven't watched it, you really should go watch it because it was just a complete masterclass by JT. And so overall, I think that this team has more consistent firepower than they did on Cloud9. From what it seems, Fang has been a phenomenal replacement for Floppy. And it seems like he could end up being even better. Like if you're watching him right now, I don't really miss Floppy, and I think that that's very impressive because Floppy was kind of the highly touted player on Cloud9. OC got up there, but when they first were signed to Cloud9, it was kind of all about Floppy, and then OC slowly rose. But Fang also has like some super slidey wide peaks, and I love it. Like if you watch some of his peaks, he's able to peek out wide, and then instead of just doing a counter strafe and stopping, he does a full counter strafe and ends up sliding back. And somehow he's able to get kills doing this, and the other team is trying to spray him down, but he's moving so much and so unexpected that it's working really well. And it's kind of cool to watch the way he just is able to slide out and slide back. So keep an eye on that. It's pretty interesting peaks. I love the way that he does it. And I also think that signing Marky for MOTM seems to have been an upgrade, at least through these last few games. I love MOTM, but from what I have seen, it seems like Marky might be a better fragger, but also might be more consistent. So it seems like that signing could have worked out for the Extra Salt lineup. JT has also been fragging really well, and you've seen a lot of people on Twitter talking about his fragging. And I've always thought that JT has gotten a very bad rap on his fragging. A lot of people don't understand that he is always in horrible situations, and isn't that he's necessarily a bad fragger, it's that he's sacrificing for his team constantly, setting them up for kills, entering in when it's an unfavorable situation, like through a smoke and they don't have a flash or something. He's always the one sacrificing his life for the rest of his team. So his stats always look horrible, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad fragger. I actually have a whole video on this, on why I think JT was the most underrated player in NA. That's the name of the video. It's over on my C9 Win channel if you want to check it out. It's like 20 something minutes of just talking and showing about why JT is actually not a bad fragger, but it's a look into how he plays so sacrificially. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. I think you might find that pretty interesting. But I was thinking after the Dignitas game, is JT actually a better fragger? Or is it just that his team is more consistent now, and so he is just getting more frags and is getting less terrible deaths? So during my rewatch, I was paying attention to JT when they'd show his point of view, and it actually does look like he is getting better mechanically. I went back and watched some old footage and then compared it to the recent games, and his aim definitely seems less jerky, like less, definitely seems smoother. The horizontal movement is smoother. There's less like up and down when he's moving horizontally, and the crosshair seems to be at a head level more often. And then also when he's holding a corner and moving, like if he's holding an angle and then, still moving to the side, it's become smoother. Now it could just be small sample size of the recent games and then the old footage I was looking at, but based on what I saw, I would say his mechanics do look better. So it could be that his mechanics are better. It could be that his teammates are more consistent. Could be a combination of both. But from what I've seen, it definitely looks like he has improved, and that's going to be incredible for this lineup. So next up, they have the upper bracket finals for FunSpark, where if they win that, they will then get a one map advantage in the finals, which is a best of 5. If they lose, they then go to the lower bracket finals, have to win that to then make the finals. So they're playing 4s, and I think that there's a 100% chance that they play Dust 2 again. My guess is that the 3 maps will be Dust 2, Overpass, and Nuke. I think Train and Inferno are also on the table, but that's just my guess. So hopefully some of the issues on Dust 2 will be shored up by then, and they can pull off the 2-0. But after FunSpark, they'll then have DreamHack, Spring Sweet Spring, and IEM. So they have a lot of matches and tournaments coming up. And they're also supposed to have ESEA Premier again, but I don't know how they're going to pull that off because I think that's supposed to start in 2 weeks. So I don't know if they're going to try and just forfeit a bunch of games and then make it back and try and make playoffs by just winning every one of their last games. Or I don't know if they're just going to bow out of it completely or play remotely. But that's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do there. As long as they keep performing in Europe, I think they're going to keep getting invites in Europe. And so they're probably going to stay there for quite a while. And I don't see why they would leave to come back to play Premier against much worse teams when they keep getting invited to playing the top teams in the world in Europe. So they've done a great job so far, and they have a ton of matches coming up. And I think that there's a legit possibility that they can get their first tournament win since they signed with Cloud9 this weekend. They've made a bunch of tournaments, but they haven't won any. So hopefully that can happen this weekend. I think they can beat 4s. We'll see who they end up facing in the finals. It's been a tournament of upsets. I wouldn't really call Dignitas versus Extrasalt an upset. They're very close in rankings, and I think Extrasalt, their map pool just fit perfectly with Dignitas, and they're just playing well. So this team just seems much more consistent than before. They seem possibly even more drilled. And I really like the look of the team right now and the teamwork that they're showing. And I don't see why they would slow down. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I'll see you after the tournament finishes.